as presented by the Manitoba Craft Council. The Manitoba Craft Council was founded in 1978 as Manitoba's only not-for-profit arts organization dedicated exclusively to contemporary craft. The Manitoba Craft Council is located in Winnipeg within Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, Dakota, and is the birthplace of the Métis Nation and the heart of the Métis Nation homeland. The purpose of the MCC is to promote, develop, and advocate for contemporary craft and its bakers in Manitoba. For over 40 years, the organization has worked to ensure that contemporary craft and the artists who produce it are supported, recognized, and celebrated for their contribution to the cultural and economic life in Manitoba. In these challenging times, the Manitoba Craft Council is proud to create programming to help artists, craftspeople, and other makers adapt to the rapid and continuing changes in our community. I'm pleased to introduce Anna Hunter, our speaker tonight. Anna started knitting in 1999 while she was a live-in nanny in Switzerland. During a leave from her work as an anti-poverty advocate in 2009, she decided to open up a yarn store in the Hastings Sunrise neighborhood of East Vancouver. The store, Bad Anna's Yarn Store, quickly became a neighborhood staple, a great little yarn store with a selection of natural fibers and a focus on local dyers and spinners. It was also a space where a community thrived, knitters or not. After 5.5 years in business, it was time for a new challenge, and the store was sold to a longtime friend and customer, and the store still operates in East Vancouver today. Anna has always had a passion for building community, challenging injustice, and creating alternatives. Longway Homestead is the next step in pursuing these passions as she seeks to connect people with local food and clothing production. Please type any questions you may have into the chat, and they'll be answered at the Q&A after the presentation. If you're using a desktop computer, the chat can be found on the right side of the live video, and on your phone, the chat will be right below. We have several members of the Pembina Fibreshed joining Anna for the Q&A at the end. Thank you, and I'll leave it off to Anna.
Much for having me. Thank you to the MCC for hosting this. We're really excited that we get to talk a little bit about the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge a spirit of gratitude that I get to present to you today from Treaty 1 territory. The Pembina Fibreshed works and represents producers on Treaty 1 and Treaty 2 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji, Dakota, Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Can't really have a conversation about textile agriculture and clothing without recognizing that farming has historically been and continues to be used as a tool of colonization. Agriculture has played a huge role in dispossessing Indigenous people from their homelands. And when we look at fashion and slow clothing and circular textile industries, we must include a plan and an acknowledgement of reconciliation. So the Pembina Fibreshed has just concluded a 1 year project called the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge. Our goal as the Pembina Fibreshed is to support local farmers, dyers, spinners, and designers to produce more local textiles, and to get that in the hands of local knitters, spinners, weavers, and sewists, and to build a thriving Manitoba fiber economy. The word Fibreshed is based on the geological concept of a watershed, an area of land where all the water that falls in it drains toward a common outlet. A watershed offers a powerful image of the complexity of natural ecosystems, how actions in one location resonate throughout the whole area. In describing a Fibreshed, we focus on the elements in our region that contribute to the ways we create fabric for clothing and other household uses. We connect producers and processors, artisans and consumers in a dynamic way, a dynamic system that sustainably manages resources and strengthens our ties to that land. In southern Manitoba, our Fibreshed includes sheep, alpaca farmers, processors such as fiber mills and dyers, designers and tool makers, artisans such as spinners, weavers, knitters, felters. We are not a cotton growing region, however, but there is the potential for making cloth from locally grown flax and hemp. And then also in our Fibreshed, there's a tradition on this land of working with animal skins, and furs that we want to acknowledge, respect, and incorporate into the work of the Pembina Fibreshed. The focus on local fiber production parallels this rapidly growing interest in local food. Buying locally means products that have traveled fewer miles, consuming less fossil fuels, money that is in the local economy, strengthening rural communities and small businesses, instead of contributing to the profits of large corporations with questionable ethical practices. The rampant consumer pressure on the global textile industry to produce masses of cheap clothing leads directly to environmental problems, water pollution, soil degradation, and overflowing landfill sites. So the Fibreshed movement was founded in 2010 by a woman named Rebecca Burgess, who was in Northern California, and she decided that she wanted to spend one full year only wearing clothing that had been grown, harvested, sewn, dyed, manufactured within 100 miles of her home in Northern California. This launched what is now called the Fibreshed movement. The Pembina Fibreshed is a local affiliate that we started in January of 2018, basically to look at our regional context and to start developing that. So the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge is actually a way to kind of go back to the root of Fibreshed, which was the project that Rebecca Burgess did. We kind of viewed 3 pieces of clothing as a more attainable challenge goal rather than an entire wardrobe for an entire year. So in January last year, 2021, we launched the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge for the Pembina Fibreshed. Our goals were to provide a structure for imaginative, flow fashion to thrive, to celebrate and incorporate the local talent and the production within our Fibreshed, to connect folks to each other and to build community through team meetings, events, workshops, whatever, and to really focus on the collaborative nature of this project, that it wasn't a competition. And then finally, to create and share a body of work reflecting the unique resources that we have within this land base. So we set up a few parameters for our 1 year, 1 outfit challenge. The first thing was obviously that it was only 3 items for an outfit. And we defined an outfit as 3 pieces of clothing, adornments, or accessories. So it didn't have to be, a full outfit. It could be 3 pieces within an outfit. So the main parameters other than that was, first of all, that the people involved lived within the Pembina Fibreshed. We define this as approximately 200 miles in any direction of the Pembina River Valley in Manitoba. The second parameter was that all fiber, all raw resources had to be sourced within that 200-mile radius. The only exception being any sort of notions like threads, some buttons, anything that we just do not have the raw resources or manufacturing capability for here. The majority of that ended up being protein fibers, which we grow a lot of in Manitoba. So we've got wool, alpaca, angora. We accepted the use of skins and furs and hides as long as they had been harvested from within the region. And we encouraged experimentation and the use of local plant fibers like nettle, milkweed, flax, and either blended with protein-based fibers like wool or used on their own. And then finally, the last parameter is that any dyes that are used are natural, they're not synthetic, and that the dyes would come from within the Fibreshed, with the one exception that any mordants like alum that is used in natural dyeing could be sourced, or scouring agents for washing could be sourced from outside of the Fibreshed. We don't have access to those here. So those were the parameters and the exceptions. We encouraged our participants to use their own designs or designs created by folks within the 200-mile radius, but also we were a little bit lenient on that given just our population size. So in January of 2021, we launched. We had our participants go through an application process, and we had a big launch on January 31st, and we did this via Zoom. We really wanted the 1 Year One Outfit Challenge to be a community-based project. And this right off the start had some unique challenges, COVID being the largest barrier to meeting as a group in person or having any sort of workshops in person. But we made it work with Zoom, and we had some lovely meetings every 2 months. We tried to organize Zoom workshops and meetings around the seasonality of the project. So, you know, the very first Zoom meeting that we had was about design. What goes into designing an article of clothing? How do we have a concept and turn it into reality? So this was really the fun envisioning part of the challenge. You know, the next stage was sourcing materials and how seasonal that is. Are you going to use wool, and when does shearing happen? Are you going to use a plant-based fiber? When does that need to be harvested? How long does it need to be dried? And just sort of planning out a year's worth of clothing and making. Growing dye plants, and then the finishing. So we did plan to have a few more information or hands-on based workshops or skill shares. This became a really big challenge as the year continued, and COVID just made meeting in person more challenging. We did the best we could. We hosted some special speakers. We had Laura Reeves speak to us about how to forage responsibly. Ash Alberg shared about the basics of dyeing within our fiber shed, the breadth of color that we can actually get by growing plants in Manitoba. And at the same time that we had the 1 Year One Outfit Challenge running, we also ran the Flax to Linen project. It was a separate project, but there was a lot of crossover with participants. So we actually were making, growing flax in 25 different plots around the province, and then harvesting it and transforming it into linen. We really encouraged teams and collaboration for this project. We wanted folks to feel like they weren't responsible for those 3 items all by themselves, that they could work together in a team. We encouraged outdoor meetups, and you can see there's some dyeing here and some knitting meetups and some felting workshops, and just a real chance for folks to get together and explore the creativity and challenges of making our own clothing together. So I kind of want to go through the 3 aspects of this project and how folks navigated that, or you know, what they experienced. So the first one is the local fiber, so local resources. The second time we met on Zoom, we talked about how to access the resources necessary to produce clothing, and it was very telling on how so many of us didn't actually really know where these fibers came from. The majority of the fiber grown in our region is protein-based, so many of our projects reflect the rich abundance of wool, Angora, and alpaca fiber. This is a map of sort of how we encourage people to source things within our region. Obviously, it's a loose suggested map, but it gives you an idea of how big the region actually is. We had a list of known producers throughout the region that are already selling or producing wool, but we encouraged participants to find creative ways to look for what they needed. The feedback we heard from both producers and participants was that it was a great learning experience, and a lot of valuable connections were made. And this was probably really beneficial for the producers as well, who hadn't previously found an avenue for selling their wool. They weren't already creating value-added products. So meeting with artisans and with makers was really invaluable in learning how to do a better job of marketing their wool. We did have some folks use milkweed, flax, and nettle, but the majority of the fiber produced or accessed was wool and alpaca and mohair. So the second aspect was local color. So this is focusing on the dye plants that could be grown within our fiber shed. We didn't stipulate that everyone had to access the seeds from local, but we did encourage that. And the one exception, obviously, being the mordants for natural dyeing, such as alum, that would need to be sourced outside of the province, out of the region. So I have to say that observing and participating in the natural dyeing part of this project was probably the most engaging part, probably because it happened in the summer. So we were outside and enjoying the nice sunny weather. Also, we were able to meet up and engage in person a little bit more for the dyeing portion of this project. Here's some pictures of different participants, and I'll highlight the middle one, which was one of our participants, and that's Bethany, and she's peeling the bark and the leaves off of an apple tree, and her house was actually being rebuilt, and in the process of, getting rid of the old house, the apple tree got knocked down. And, there was a lot of grief over losing an apple tree that had been such an important resource for their family and on their yard, and it had been there forever. So she harvested the leaves and the bark, and she actually dyed wool out of it that she then turned into a garment for her team's project. So there were these beautiful moments of connection and creation that came not from the planning, but from just the way that life happens. But now it'll be a piece that she'll cherish forever, because she's been able to keep that piece of nature that was important to her alive in her clothing. So participants were experimenting with different dye flowers, different plants. We've got some cosmos in this picture, and some marigolds and black knight scabiosa. Tala is working with some solar dyeing, which is a way of dyeing wool in jars and using the heat and the power of the sun rather than having to, do it over consistent heat. We've got Bethany and Nicole dyeing with some fresh leaf indigo. There was a lot of really exciting experimenting going on, and most of the plants that were used in the project, the participants grew from seed all the way to harvest. There was some foraging that happened, but so much of it was done from seed right to the end. There was some awesome opportunity for community building as well. Tala at one point put out into the 1 year 1 outfit message board that she had an abundance of coreopsis and encouraged other participants to come and harvest their own flowers. So, there was a real sense of community built throughout the natural dyeing process of the textiles. So local labor and all processing of the fibers for the project had to happen within the fiber shed. The one exception being that if there was any processing that required infrastructure that just does not exist in the region. For example, there's no mechanized flax or hemp or protein-based fibers. So, however, I think most of the processing for the project was done by hand or by the regional wool processing mill that we have in Manitoba. It seemed like most of the participants wanted the experience of going from start to finish without utilizing any of that mechanized labor. So I want to highlight a few of the different skills and techniques that the different participants and teams used. The creativity and the careful planning, and to be honest, the real fun that folks had is so evident in all the pieces that were created. So felting. For those that have never felted, it's a process of agitating wool using heat and soap and vigorous activity to cause wool basically to shrink and to felt together. This team, Katrina, Anna, and Tara, created wool clogs by wet felting wool from the Last Dance Ranch near Gimli, Manitoba. None of them had ever felted before, and they described the process like this. We set aside a Saturday to make our clogs. Little did we know the process would take about 10 hours and be a significant physical workout. We set up in Anna's basement with plastic tables over the floor drain. We had many laughs throughout the day when our clogs looked like they were made for feet multiple sizes bigger than our own, as we rubbed and rolled the wool, blasting music to keep our energy up. We had a great day, but felting may not be something we do again soon. If we try it again one day, we will know better what hard work we are getting ourselves into. I think the felted clogs are absolutely beautiful and perhaps worth all the work that went into them. But this was a great example of a team project and engaging in a new skill that they had not previously tried. Weaving was another skill that many of the participants utilized. I'll talk about the skirt made by Michelle Campeau first. Michelle is an accomplished weaver who has woven with many different materials before, and she made a skirt. The warp yarn was made from Pepper, a precocious sheep from Ferme-Fiola farm, which is east of Winnipeg. And the weft yarn was a Rambouillet yarn, also from Ferme-Fiola farm. So after weaving the fabric, Michelle washed and folded it, and then sewed a wrap skirt. And you can't tell from this picture, but there's darts also included in the skirt to accommodate her shape. Catherine Delorme also wove fabric to sew a kilted tartan skirt. And I didn't include a picture of the finished skirt. I hope that you will go check out the exhibit at C2 to see the finished skirt or the finished tartan skirt, because it's absolutely stunning. So the wool that Catherine used was 2 different fleeces that she purchased from Prairie's Edge Farm, which is a farm south of Steinbach. She purchased a white fleece and a gray fleece. And fleece refers to the entire wool off of one sheep's back. So Catherine hand washed all the wool. She combed, carded, and then spun all the wool herself into a 2-ply yarn. She then experimented with many natural dyes to get the correct shade of green. She used tansy, then marigold, then an afterbath with iron, and then she used sumac with an afterbath of iron to get the right shade. She had a very specific color in mind. The fabric was woven on a 36-inch Leclerc jack floor loom. The raw edges were overlocked for stability, and then the skirt was sewn in a combination of machine and hand sewing. Catherine added some leather buttons to the skirt, but she's hoping to source out some antler buttons for more strength. So the skirt, being completely washed, combed, spun, dyed, woven, and sewn by one person, took Catherine an entire year to make. This was one of the aspects of the project that we really wanted to dive into is when you look at all the steps involved in creating clothing, it's a lot of work. And what kind of value do we put behind that work? And how do we value it? Taking the time to do every step, to dye and then over dye your fiber to make sure you get the exact color you want, makes you feel so much more connected to the end result. Tanning skins and hides. This was a really exciting option. I'm really glad that we had some pieces submitted. And again, I hope that you will check out the exhibit and take a look at them. Paul Campeau learned how to do brain tanning of hides in 2018. And he has been keen to turn that beautiful tanned hides that he created into clothing ever since. So you can see in the one picture, he made cowboy chaps and a vest, which isn't pictured, it's covered by the fringe jacket. And those were hides that were tanned at Miami Leather in Miami, Manitoba. The buckskin jacket with fringe was brain tanned and smoked. And brain tanning is actually a process where you're using the brains of that animal to tan the skin. It required 3 deer hides and was hand sewn with artificial sinew and buckskin thong. It has deer antler buttons. The deer were harvested by Paul on his property in southwest Manitoba, and he did the skinning and the smoking of the hides all by himself. The bolo tie accessory, which you have to see in person, consists of a deer antler centerpiece adorned with a stylized sun made from the claws of a road-killed porcupine and pieces of beaver tail leather, all sourced from near his property in southwest Manitoba. The other project that has been submitted using skins and hides was a project spearheaded by Bethany Boy, Nicole Vechna, and myself. We all hand sewed leather belts with a tanned elk hide. You can see in this picture, Dustin, Bethany's spouse, is scraping the hide. So he harvested that elk and smoke tanned the hide himself. They were hand sewn with sinew, and Bethany actually added a sewn detail on her belt using milkweed cordage. So she had harvested some milkweed and she dried it, and then she made a cordage out of it and then incorporated that cordage detail into her belt. Hard to show in a picture close up. So again, please come by and check out the exhibit. It's stunning. And then spinning and knitting. I would say that many participants actually came to the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge with a background in knitting. And this gave them more of an opportunity to expand their skills and incorporate it into their pieces. Mandy Fernie used Shetland wool from Daphne the sheep of Leaf Haven Shetlands in Cloverdale, Manitoba. So she used the fleece of one full sheep for a sweater project. She hand washed the wool, then she spun it using an Ashford traditional wheel. During the cleaning phase, she actually separated the whitest and darkest locks from that fleece, and she spun them separately to create a really unique difference in color in the sweater. She used a small skein of the yarn and dyed it with marigold petals that produced a yellow color, and she used the solar dye method. The sweater was custom designed by Mandy and knit from the top down. So she actually designed the sweater pattern herself. Mandy worked with the natural colored yarns and the dyed yarns to create a piece that reflected the elements of the landscape that the resources came from. I think when we started this project, we imagined that we would get many submissions knitted because so many folks who engage with Fibreshed are already involved in knitting, and that's their interest. So it was really amazing to see how many beautiful knitted items there were, but also how many new techniques folks used, or how many creative ways folks engaged with their knitting from a different way. So like separating the dark and the light from a single fleece, or designing their own pattern when they maybe have never done that before. Natalie Rivard submitted a photo essay on the story of creating her sweater, and I just think the whole story is too beautiful not to share. She stated in the introduction of her submission that she learned to skirt, wash, card, and spin wool in order to nail bind it. It's a long process, but on the way, I have fallen in love with every part of it from start to finish. The sentiment of the time it took to create was something that was heard over and over from most participants. And I think the mindfulness and the connection that came from every step of the way, and especially the seasonality of it. For example, in this picture, you can see that she is washing wool. Unless you're set up to do it, that's something that you can really only do in the warmer weather, because it needs to happen outside because it is such a dirty process. So connecting clothing to our seasons is also a way of deeper connection. So she goes on to describe the eventful process of picking up her Shetland wool from Prairie's Edge Farm in south of Steinbach, Manitoba, for the sweater project. She says, I went to Prairie's Edge Farm to pick a Shetland fleece for my upcoming sweater. It was quite eventful since the brakes on my van decided to seize up, and I had to stop in at a mechanic's in Ile-des-Chênes. My husband had to pick us up. I had a baby and a preschooler with me, and we headed over to the farm. It was fun to see the sheep and great to meet Barb. I picked a fleece and of course some mohair too. So in this photo, you can see the raw fleece that Natalie picked up from Prairie's Edge. The next step was that of washing. And because the fleece had a real unique blend of colors, she washed it all separately, divided it up by color and shade, and washed it all separately. She then carded and spun the wool, and then after she spun it, she crocheted. Despite not having crocheted in many years, she crocheted the yoke of her sweater, highlighting the different shades of wool from one Shetland sheep. So you can see below the different shades that all came from that one sheep. She utilized the nail binding technique for this project and also included some Romney wool from Spirit Sands Farm in Carberry, Manitoba, and the mohair. These sorts of, stories of connection and community, even in the face of adversity like brakes failing, are what we had really hoped would emerge out of this project, what we thought and hoped would happen. So that gives you a little taste of people's stories and their creations and and how they created and what they created. So as organizers of this event, we've had some time now that the year is over to reflect on the lessons that we've learned. So the first thing would be that our clothing system requires a lot of resources. And it's not just the amount of wool required to make a sweater or the amount of, fiber to create a pair of clogs, but also the water that goes into washing that wool, or the resource of time that goes into harvesting and growing and weeding and, dyeing with those flowers. So our participants felt a stronger understanding of the kinds of resources involved in the clothing we consume. The second lesson was we are not paying the true cost of our clothing in the current fast fashion system that we have. So, when you spend an entire year from concept to finishing on 3 pieces of clothing, you really understand what goes into creating those clothing. And when we're not investing that amount of time and energy, what is happening? How are those clothes actually being made, and how can we do it on such a cheap or such a low cost scale? And who is taking on those true costs of the way our clothing are created? And then finally, we need to create more opportunities for connection with our clothing for community. We don't know if we're going to run this program again, at least not right away in the next year. But what became very evident was that there are really important conversations that emerged out of these times that we got together and the community that we created around what goes into our clothing. So in conclusion, we hope that you will stay connected to the Pembina Fibreshed. We will plan to run the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge again in the future, possibly not this year. And hopefully we will do it in a year where we can actually meet in community and in person to share these skills and learn from each other and create more beautiful pieces of clothing. I want to thank all the participants of the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge for working so hard, for contributing their pieces to this exhibition, and for really committing a year to this sort of slow clothing, slow fashion project. I want to give a huge thanks to the Manitoba Craft Council and the Craft Museum for your support of this exhibition and for this artist talk. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, Anna, for that amazing talk. That was awesome. I'm now joined with several members of the Pembina Fibreshed. We have Anna Hunter, who just gave that fantastic talk. We have Catherine and Tala are here to chat with you guys. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat and we can answer them as they come up. I have some questions for you while everyone is getting theirs into the chat. So how was it working with like sheep fleece versus working with roving? I've worked with roving, but I've never worked with fleece. Were there any specific challenges with that? And anyone can answer who wants to.
I don't know who is supposed to answer here. Yeah, I mean, when you get a sheep fleece, it does smell kind of barnyard. Reminds me of my childhood. And I know the very first white fleece that I had got, I was adventurous and I decided to wash the whole darn thing in one go in my bathtub. That's an adventure. You discover which end is the head end and which end is the tail end by what blooms out of it, all right. After that one experience, then I decided to do it in smaller sections. Much easier to manage in smaller sections.
Absolutely. Mandy is joining us now as well. I have a question from Morgan Posberg. Did you ever have issues with raw material producers, farmers of the mills, having a lack of trust in the designers, makers, fiber shed, and having to be convinced before wanting to work with them?
That's an interesting question. The mill didn't have any issues, but I will speak for the mill. I think it was really collaborative, and a lot of the producers were on teams with different participants. I think a lot of producers were just really happy to be approached and be included. I don't know what you folks experienced, Catherine, Tal, or Mandy, but I think all three of you probably had really great relationships with the producers you sourced your fiber from.
Yeah, I got bats from Prairie's Edge Wool Farm, and Barb was fantastic, and was also a participant in the project as well. So just really excited to see where she worked as well. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, I was, because I'm out of province, just slightly out of province, and there was all those restrictions about crossing the border. I couldn't get into Manitoba till July, maybe. Yeah, so I had emailed Barb, and she had posted out some bats to me as well that came quickly. So I was able to work on them here.
Awesome. We have a question from Francesca Cra. I'm wondering if any participants had ongoing contact while creating their pieces. So many skills, and have any of them done this before? So were you guys experienced in all of these techniques, or were anyone else experienced, or was there a research or a combination of both?
I ended up taking a couple of the farm school courses at Longway around dye gardens and natural dyeing. And other than that, I bought a book and just messed around quite a bit. But people were very, very willing to chat whenever I got up the nerve to chat with them.
Yeah, I'd taken some dye classes before, but I took the indigo one in July. And then I got into a weaving course with the Manitoba Fiber Artists group in November. So I was able to take that.
Awesome.
And I guess I challenged myself to learn some new techniques during this, because the samples you showed, Anna, were my knit, but I did challenge myself to do some weaving and such, just to give myself that challenge, to try different things with fiber, what I could do with it. But I didn't take courses. I sought out education, I guess, in many different ways, reading and online resources and such.
I know there were a few participants who tried things they hadn't done before, the felting, spinning or weaving. Maybe they're a knitter, but they decided to try weaving. Our hope was that we would be able to offer more hands-on courses or skill shares or learning, but COVID made that really challenging. So I'm so amazed and impressed by the work that folks did and sought out new skills, and yeah, it was great.
Fantastic. Were people there were a few sort of cross trainings as well, and I'm sure you guys would have hoped to have more of that, but unfortunately pandemic got in the way.
Hopefully the next time we run this, we will be able to, instead of our Zoom workshops, we'll be able to meet in person and do a skill. So, meet and dye some stuff, or meet and wash some fleece, hopefully.
Yeah. Especially because craft is so collaborative as well. That's a really hard thing to navigate through. Was there any regrets that you guys had while you were working on this project? Not in terms of the whole project, but there's always those moments where you're like, oh, wow, I really started with a fleece, and maybe I would have started with roving next time if I had thought, did anyone have any moments where they were like, a lesson learned here?
Yeah, it does make you appreciate what mills do.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it would have been nice if the flax thing had produced more fiber, I guess. But going forward, we'll probably do more flax related things.
I spun before, but I never tried to spin consistently for more than one skein. So I did a couple of projects where I used 2 or 3 that had to match the weight of each other. So that was partway through. I was like, how many bats of Shetland am I doing again? This is fun. Yeah. So there were moments, especially in the spinning phase, where I was like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever.
I would also love to hear you all talk a little bit about your specific pieces of work that you made, because Anna talked generally about all of you, but I would love to hear you all talk a little bit about the works themselves. And obviously I've seen the show at C2, which is beautiful, and everyone should check it out. It's open until this Saturday, but I would love to hear you guys talk a little bit about what you specifically made, if that's okay with you guys. And maybe we can start with Catherine if she's comfortable.
Okay. Well, I had planned the skirt, which was a long project, but I had got the bats from Prairie's Edge, so I made those long socks. And when I look back, that project went really quickly. So that at least gave me some quick gratification, because the rest of it went on all year. I had done that plaid skirt. I've got some of my scrap fabric here. Yeah, and that was again where I wanted to spin enough to get enough to be fairly consistent and fairly fine, and so it was a long time to get enough material, and then to, of course, because you have to dye it all the same dye lot in the same pot, because you're never going to match it otherwise. You have to do it all together as one dye lot. And then because I was going to do a flax top, and then I didn't have enough flax, I did the little fingerless gloves, because I was so afraid of running out of fabric or yarn for this. I had a whole extra skein of green. So then it was like, okay, I'm going to use this for something else. And I had some more of just the plain white. And that's when I decided, oh, I've got enough plain white. I will pull out, I'd collected a bunch of dye flowers and dried them. And I'm like, I have enough, I can dry them. So I'm like, I'm going to make some different colors and make something else. And then I did one extra hat at the end. So
an overachiever. They said 3 and you did 4.
That one took the longest.
I've seen them and I completely understand why that would have taken longer. It's beautiful work. Tala, do you want to talk about what you made?
Sure. I started, I guess, with the Shetland bats I was talking about, and I spun a bunch of natural colors because I'm a little bit obsessed with gradients. And so at first I had this idea that I was going to make some kind of smush of all these natural colors together. And then I got distracted and decided to make a gray and white scarf, because I just was really enjoying the gray and white together. So as I was knitting that, I was also growing my first dye garden. So me and my son were planting and tending this little garden that I thought was going to be nothing, and then just gave us so many flowers forever and ever and ever. So I ended up with the Shetland, I was working on the scarf, and then with the browns, I made some fingerless mitts in Fair Isle. And then I spent the rest of my time with a big bat from Anna, a rambouillet that I split and dyed with the flowers from my garden. So I had coreopsis and calendula. And then I had some choke cherries from a woman at work that graciously passed them on to me and said they're very good dye. And so I was like, sure, why not? I can do that. And so I dyed it as a bat, I guess, as fleece before I spun it. And then I played with a drum carder after it was dyed and blended them together to make the gradient for the sweater that I created. And then I don't actually know how to make sweaters, so I just kind of made that up. I'm not supposed to tell people that.
You can tell people that. That makes it more amazing that you learned
No,
to do it in a year.
I used the cast on for like a baby raglan sweater with an open front, and then I just like messed around because I can't follow the pattern. Sometimes I get really distracted.
That's amazing that you learned how to knit sweaters while learning to process fiber and dye as well. Yeah,
it's kind of silly.
Mandy, do you want to talk a little bit about your project?
I made a lot of things. I spin a lot, and so a lot of my process was just to spin a lot of, I still have like a big basket full of stuff that hasn't been used yet. So it's not on my floor now. That's fine. So a lot of my process was kind of just playing this year. I did get a lot of raw fleeces. I had the Shetland fleece from Daphne that went into primarily the sweater, and then leftovers went into a hat. And I also knit a little sheep whose name is Daphne, and I still have some leftovers. So I was just kind of playing with that. And I had some bats from Barb of Prairie's Edge, and that had gone into my shawl that I played with. And that was some Shetland and some Shetland alpaca that I had just kind of spun up. And then I realized that I wanted them to go together in a shawl with beads. And so that's what I did. I don't really have a process, honestly. The yarn kind of dictates. And so a lot of my playing with dye stuff was I was watching all these other folks doing dyeing in their garden over the summer. And I was learning some things that were in my own garden that I could use to dye that I hadn't really ever thought of. Somebody dyed with purple 9-bark, and I'm like, I got a whole big bush of that. Let's try that. And it came out, it's a purple leaf and a kind of bright neon yellow. And, I had marigolds, and I got some coreopsis dye, and my sister has a farm and has lots of goldenrod everywhere. So I had lots of yellow options. I have juniper, lots of juniper in my yard. That's actually my favorite yellow results. So I did lots of playing. And then once I had all these skeins of yarn dyed, that's where some of the ideas came from, of just pairing them together, what would look nice. And my neighbor has hollyhocks, and she's like, they leave dye on my hand when I fall off. So you should try dyeing with them, because she saw my jars out on my deck, and she's just kept, just come pick all these dead hollyhocks. So we did lots of really stinky hollyhock dyeing outside. I brought it in once, and that was regretful. Learned my lesson there. That was gross. And then I had this one skein of dark brown chocolate yarn that I got from Ferme Fiola this summer, or this fall, I guess, when I was out at the market with Anna and Christelle, and it sat on my shelf forever, and I kept walking past it, and I kid you not, one day it told me it had to be mittens. And obviously it just had to go with some of the white, and I had all this white because I had like 5 fleeces I processed. Yeah, five fleeces I'd processed. So I had lots of white that I'd been spinning. So the spinning that I had done while I was walking at the dog park, this is how crazy it is. Like, I just spin all the time, walking at the dog park with my spindle, and my dog's running, and I'm enjoying the outdoors in the summer. And that's the fiber that went into the mittens. So it was just a fairly simple dark and light contrast color work mittens. And they became that because the yarn insisted it had to be mittens now. And so that's what I did. That was my very haphazard process.
I don't think that's a haphazard process at all. And also, it brings me great joy to imagine you at the dog park spinning with your spindle. That's just heart, like fills my heart. Anna, do you want to talk a little? I know you did a whole talk, but your talk was more about the project as a whole. I would love for you to talk a little bit about your work specifically in the show.
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to say I didn't finish anything. I didn't really even start anything. My contribution was creating the space for this project to happen and coordinating the Zoom calls and the few speakers that we did have and bringing it all together. I do a lot of I've realized I do less and less making myself and more facilitation for others through the mill. And I'm lying a little bit. I did make a leather belt out of some elk hide that Bethany and Nicole and I had softened, and Bethany's husband had harvested that elk and had it smoke tanned, and then we did cut and sew a belt out of it. So that was my one tiny little actual finished project.
Michelle Campo is reflecting my own feelings that I was gonna say, which is don't be embarrassed. You do so much, which is true. The coordinating positions are what makes all of this happen. So you did the really important work of the project happening.
Thanks, Michelle.
So the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge is up at the Seacher Center for Craft, which is in downtown in Winnipeg, from 12 to 4 p.m. on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and it closes on February 26th on Saturday. So unless any of you have anything else you'd like to share, which you're totally welcome to, I think that'll end our.
I'll jump in and share something. I just want anyone who didn't participate in this last year to send us a line, connect@pembinafibreshed.com, and let us know if you want to participate in a future version of the 1 year, 1 outfit challenge. I think a lot of folks missed out on the first one and want to know if we're running it again, and we're still just trying to figure the logistics of that out. And if you're interested in the Pembina Fibreshed in general and the other projects and campaigns we have going on, we have a big community report back and strategic planning meeting online tomorrow night, and all the details are on our website. Thank you so much, Katrina and the MCC, for hosting us and putting on this talk.
Thank you guys for doing such amazing work and for showing it to the community. And we have a whole bunch of thank yous and lovely comments in the comments, so you guys can take those home with you as well. And the show is really fantastic. We were installing it last week, so everybody go and check it out. There's people in the comments also saying they're going to see the show, so yay. So thank you guys so much for sharing your time with us tonight, and thank you, Anna, for a fantastic talk. And it was a joy being here with you guys tonight.
Thanks.